Alright guys, in the last video we went ahead and created our UI using materialized CSS. We added all our markup, and there's one thing we forgot to do, and that was to include the actual app.js file. So let's make sure we do that. We're going to go down to the bottom here, and we're going to put this under the jQuery and materialized scripts. So we'll go here and we'll say script source is going to be app.js. Okay. So make sure that's connected. All right. Now, I briefly explained how this is going to go. We talked about the module pattern. Basically, we're going to have a storage controller for local storage, which isn't going to happen till the end. We're going to have an item controller for our local data that have to do with the item and the calories and all that. Then we'll have our UI controller that has to do with anything to do with the UI. So, showing, hiding things, getting input. Then we'll have our main app controller where everything will meet, and that's also where we're going to put our initial event listeners, and we'll also have our initializer, our init function there. Okay, so let's go ahead. I'm going to put some comments in here. So the storage controller, I'm going to put at the top, but like I said, we're not going to actually create that until later on. Then we'll have the item controller. Why do I keep doing capital O? So item controller, then we're going to have the UI controller, and then the app controller. Okay. So basically, let's start with the items. So for this, we're going to say const item ctrl. That's the convention we're going to use. And we're going to set this to an IFI, which is an immediately invoked function expression. So a function that will just automatically run right away. So we'll say item controller equals some parentheses, and inside here, we're going to run the function. And in order for that to invoke, we need to put an extra pair of parentheses here. Okay, so if I were to go in here and say console.log, and we'll just say item controller and save, you'll see that runs. Okay, so item controller, let's copy that, paste it in here, and this is going to be the UI controller. All right, then we're going to have the app controller, which I'm going to just call app. Okay, I'm not going to call it app controller. It's up to you if you want to. I just like to call it app. And then we're going to insert these controllers into the main controller. Okay, so item and also UI controller, and the storage later on when we do that. Now we're also going to have to pass it in here as well, where it's actually invoked. All right, so we'll go ahead and save that. Now, when we add an item here, we need a constructor. We need an item constructor so that we can create an item and then we can add it to the state or the data structure. So we're going to go into the item controller and create that. So let's say item constructor, and we're just going to say const item, okay, capital I, equals, and it's going to equal a function. And it's going to be passed in three things. So ID, name, calories. Okay. Each time we add an item in calories, it's going to have an ID, and I'll show you how we're going to generate the IDs. So with any constructor, we need to set this dot and then the property to the property being passed in. So this dot ID, this dot name equals name, this dot calories equals calories. Oh, yep. All right, so that's our constructor. Now we're going to create the data structure, which is also, I guess, the state. If you think of a React application and you talk about state, this is very similar. And that's the idea of this project, is to kind of give you the feel of a React or Angular JS application with just vanilla JavaScript. Okay. So we're going to create a variable called data. You could even call it state if you want. And then we're going to have items, which is going to be an array. We're going to have a current item, which is going to be set to null. Now, what I mean by current item is when we go to update, if I click the update icon, we're going to want that particular item, that meal item, to be the current item. And then that's going to get put up here in the form to be updated. All right, so that's what I mean by current item. And then we're also going to have total calories, which obviously is going to be right here. Okay, and that's going to be set to 0 by default. So that's our data structure for this application. Not very difficult. Now what I want to do is initially set some items here. So this is going to be an array of objects, and each one will have an ID, which I'm going to just manually set to 0 here. And then they'll have what, an item, not an item, a name. So we'll say steak dinner, and the calories, which I'll set to 1200. All right, and then I'll just copy this, paste in 2 more. So this will be ID 1, 2. So this one will say cookie. This one was, what did I think it was eggs. Doesn't really matter. So cookie will say 400, eggs will say 300. Okay, so there's our hard-coded data just to start with. Now, as we talked about in the module pattern, this stuff is private, okay? This is not accessible, for instance, from Chrome. So if we were to save this, and I were to go down here and say item CTRL, that log data is actually coming from the first version I built of this, or the initial version. But if I say .data like that, it's going to say cannot read property data of undefined. So if we want to be able to access this data, which I actually do want to have a function to access it just to test things out, we're going to have to return. Okay, so whatever we return from the module is what is going to be public. So let's go down here, and we're going to say return, open some parentheses, and let's create a function or a method called log data. So we're going to go like that, and we're going to say return data. Okay, that way we can go over here and we can say item ctrl dot log data, and there we go. So now we can see that we have these 3 items. Now I could go down to the main app controller here and do a console.log, grab from, not the UI, the item controller, log data, and save. And now when the application loads, you'll see that it's going to log the data down here. All right. So what I want to do next is I want the app controller, it's just going to return one function or one method, and that's going to be the init. Okay, it's the initializer for the app. Anything that we need to run right away when the application loads, that's where that's going to go. Okay, for instance, we want to make sure that the edit state is clear, that there's nothing in here, or it's just a new application or a new version of the application. So that stuff will go in the init. So what we'll do is say return, and we'll say init function, and just to test it out, we'll say console.log initializing app, and then we'll go down here below everything, and we'll say app.init. Okay, save it, and now we get initializing app. Okay, so this is our init. Another very important thing that this init is going to do is it's going to call from the item controller a method called getItems, which is going to get all of these items right here, and then we're going to use the UI controller to populate the list. All right, so all of these modules are going to work very closely together. So you'll see that as we start to form this application. All right, let me just put some comments in here just so this doesn't confuse you. When we return from the module, these are, we'll say public methods, UI controller. We'll just put the return in for now. Okay. And then, later on we'll do the storage controller. So maybe we should just separate these a little bit. And I think we're good. So let's save that. And in the next video, we're going to create the get items method in the item controller so that we can fetch these items and then populate them with the UI controller. All right, so I will see you then.